Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and it is about time to get deep in the weeds. We're going to be talking Bolton, Russiagate, and so much more. Before we get into it, folks, I need your support. Let me repeat myself. I need your support. I can absolutely not do it without you. $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. Please consider supporting the broadcast, not just with the Buy Me a Coffee, but there is a PayPal link down below. Without further ado, let's get deep in the weeds.
That's where we're going. It's Friday. It's 9 a.m. Unbelievable amount of positive feedback on this segment on the show. People are like, I got to tune in every Friday at 9 now because you guys are talking about such cool stuff. Appreciate all that. Appreciate all the folks, going out of their way to say, hey, this is awesome. You got to keep doing this. So, great stuff. Love that. And we're always happy to welcome Jason Bermas here, going deep in the weeds on the Dolph Ford AD in the Morning Show. Jason, how you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Well, of course, man. We got a little bit of a thing going here. Every week that we've done this, we have I get different people reaching out about different things that we talk about, and just kind of like turned on their head a little bit with some of the stuff because, well, when you start fact checking, you start looking around, you're like, hey, that guy's right. Hey, look at this. It's wild. I love it. Of course, Jason, for folks who don't know, famous documentary filmmaker. I happened to just watch Loose Change last night and finish it up this morning, and we're going to start working into some of that in the coming weeks with September 11th anniversary coming up. But he's also the host of Making Sense of the Madness on YouTube TV. He's been described as a statistical anomaly in an NSA file that may or may not exist. And there are theories that he's actually working for the FBI, just trailing Todd McGreevy from River City's Reader. That's just what we know. But something I wanted to ask you, just so we can let folks know, now you're live on video right now, or people can watch this segment if they want to watch you, because you have all kinds of cool stuff you pull up on the screen and all that. How would they go about doing that if they want to watch you during this segment?
So because I do want them to listen live if they can, I am not simulcast streaming, but what happens is I will take this, which we are recording, and let's say that you wanted to see the 9/11 event that I'm actually going to be a part of. We're going to pull that up right now. So now you can see me, and you can see that I'm going to be speaking at the Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice in 2025 event in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be doing it remotely, unfortunately, not going to be able to make it out there. Speaking on 9/11, as well as family members Bob McIlvaine and activists like Luke Rudowski. But the real headliners of this event from 9/10 through 9/12 are U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, former U.S. Senator Kurt Weldon, who I've interviewed in the past, former U.S. Representative Dennis Kucinich, and John Kiriakou, CIA whistleblower, amongst them. So if you can get to D.C., if this is something that interests you, and even if you're a fan of the Redacted show, Clayton Morris is also going to be speaking on this one. So please check that out. And then if you want to see this after the fact, I post it everywhere from my X at Jason Bermas, Bermas, to the YouTube. And if you guys end up going to my YouTube page, I'm talking to the WQUD folks, you could actually embed this anywhere. So you say you wanted to share it with anybody, you can share more than just the link. The embed code is also there, and you can place it there. And while we talk about the articles or subjects, I sometimes show articles, or if we play videos on the program, you actually get to see that video and not just hear it.
That's awesome. So there you go. Because I had a few people ask me about that, like, hey, how can I watch this or this and that? And I said, well, I go to Jay, and I started explaining. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have Jason explain that on the air. That's probably the best way to go. So we had some other stuff we were talking about. And if we get to the rabbits with the tentacles coming out of their face in Colorado later on, hopefully we can talk a little bit about that. Because that is like right. I mean, you talk about this, you say they're doing this stuff underground, they're doing all these experiments, and then this thing pops out. So we'll try to get that. But we got some breaking news that just came out. Kind of in with the Russiagate stuff. John Bolton's house, now he's the guy with the walrus mustache that you used to see always walking next to Trump. His house just got raided, right?
It did. And for those that are unaware of John Bolton, I do not know that there is a larger representation for the neocons and warmongering. And I got to tell you, I have been extremely, and I mean extremely skeptical that any of these quote-unquote indictments surrounding Russiagate, which we're going to get into today, surrounding really the attempted coup d'etats against Trump, the 2020 election, etc. Extremely skeptical that we were even going to get arrests, but here we are. And we are starting to see indictments and arrests. J.D. Vance actually recently went on television, and I'm not sure if you've seen this list of people that are supposedly going to be indicted, but Adam Schiff is amongst them. Obviously, John Bolton would be on the quote-unquote other side of that fence, supposedly, but very much in line with a lot of Schiff's talking points. But the other really interesting person to me on that list is Bill Barr, the former attorney general for Trump, and somebody I was warning about was never your friend. And another really encouraging sign that they are at least going to attempt to bring criminal charges and prosecute these people successfully is that Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is a real shining star in this administration. This administration has been far from perfect. I am hypercritical about what's going on in the Middle East. I am extremely upset that it doesn't seem like all of these talks with Russia and Ukraine, Zelensky, the EU, Putin himself are going to end that conflict. Gabbard's not a warmonger. And a lot of people are going to say that this cut of intelligence, he's the director of national intelligence, by half has a lot to do with AI. And I don't necessarily think that is a wrongful criticism. I think some of it certainly has to do with AI. But when you are gutting half of the intelligence bureaucracy, you are clearly trying to get some of the cancer out. And to me, that is absolutely step one. You cannot have people in these positions, many of whom the vast majority of the public, and even people like myself, are not familiar with their names, being in these positions now for 2, 3, sometimes 4 decades, in a world where these intelligence agencies have manufactured consent through manufacturing quote-unquote evidence. Some of the most egregious that people know about, of course, are the weapons of mass destruction that did not exist, the association between Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein that did not exist, the idea of Iraq and a dirty bomb which did not exist. I could give you 24 other examples, from the Hunter Biden laptop being Russian disinformation to the idea, of course, and which we'll expand upon, that Donald Trump was an agent of Russia and had spent time over at Moscow in the Kremlin, where he liked to be peed on by hookers in motels.
Okay, whoa. You just threw me for a little bit of a loop here, Jason Bermas.
I mean, for those that do not know what I just mentioned, that is probably the most absurd of the many claims from the quote-unquote Steele dossier, that we now have the internal communications. Many of us already knew this, but there was some speculation in regard to how involved a.k.a. Barack Obama was at the time of the end of his second term as presidency, how involved John Brennan was in this operation, and it turns out they were leading it. A lot of people talk about Hillary Clinton and her quote-unquote buying the Steele dossier, which is somewhat true. Christopher Steele, this ex-British intelligence guy, gets commissioned to find all this dirt on Trump, but then you find out that literally 90+% of it is completely manufactured. And of course, the prostitute thing that I just talked about was a part of that dossier. Hell, even Tom Arnold, if you remember Roseanne's ex-husband, he was given a show on Vice where they were trying to hunt down the pee-pee tapes that do not exist. I mean, that is how absurd that story got. But again,
tapes.
exactly.
Have that one on my bingo card today.
Well, they're fictitious. I mean, anybody that's followed Trump, there are you could certainly be critical of Trump and the way that he has spoken about and even treated women. He's a very transactional man. He's somebody that has been utterly shameless when talking about the outer beauty of women and his lust for them. Let's be honest. Anyone that doesn't think that he was sleeping with porn star Stormy Daniels and paying her money obviously did not do their own research and just bought into one side's talking points. At the same time, should he have been raked across the coals or brought into court for that? No, absolutely not. In fact, there was just another huge win for Trump via that whole smear campaign after the fact, an attempt to put him in prison, where, I don't know if you remember this, but they literally tried to have Trump relinquish Trump Tower, no longer be able to do business in New York City, and make a ruling of something absurd of like over $1 billion against him that was then brought down to just about $500 million. I think it was $457 million. Well, just yesterday, an appellate court in New York, of all places, said that was a bunch of Johnny nonsense and just got rid of that as well. Anytime you dig deep into these allegations against Trump, they just do not hold any merit. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be hypercritical of the current policies or hypercritical of the way that they have handled the Epstein files, which, I mean, there's news coming out about those, that supposedly we are finally going to get brand new Epstein files, and that process will actually begin today with the Department of Justice obtaining more Epstein files from various cases regarding Epstein. Again, I'm not holding my breath. I don't know exactly what we're going to get, but I think it's going to be limited, and we should be critical of that. But we really have to get past these narratives, especially when we are trying to bring about peace in a region where, if that Ukraine and Russia war continues, we're talking about millions more dead. And that may not mean much to some of the people listening to this, but for me, I am a very pro-life guy in the sense that I realize the bankers aren't fighting their own wars. The people that are fighting these wars are often, poor or middle class. In the case of Ukraine, you've literally had military-age men dragged off the streets. And this past week, I was in a heated debate via the Mario Nafal broadcasts with literally 4 intelligence people. Among the 8 there, Malcolm Nance, who is embedded in Ukraine and a reporter for MSNBC, a.k.a. MSN Now, which they just changed the name, and CNN. Yeah. This guy is literally funding some of the war with his own money and buying the Ukrainians uniforms and equipment. We had an individual that was Matt Tario. He's somebody that was literally over in Ukraine just before the conflict broke out, training the Ukrainian soldiers. Totally pro-war. Lev Parnas was on my panel. This is an individual that was embedded in the Trump administration the first time around, somebody who was born in the Soviet Union, and very bitter about the fact that during that time period of going after Giuliani and Trump, they went after Lev Parnas and they put him in jail. So he is just full-on pro-Ukraine. And then I had another individual who worked for the defense apparatus, and he was talking about letting this war go on until Russia is bankrupt. That's
I don't
totally.
think that's going to happen, though.
Well, that's the other thing when I ask these individuals, when I hear things like that, I don't think they have a grip on reality. I don't think that they have any real empathy for human beings if they would propose something like that. And I asked very directly, because I actually think it's more than this. And I said, hey, wait a minute. do any of you disagree with me that if this remains a conventional war, in the sense that they don't break out nuclear weapons, God forbid, or something that's never been utilized, that Russia can't do this for 5, maybe 10 more years or more? And every single one of them agreed that was the case. 5 years is too much. 10 years is too much. If I had my way, the next 5 days would be too much.
Yeah.
And this thing has to stop. I mean, we are in an extremely dangerous situation. But let me say this: I don't think things like this can stop, because obviously Russiagate stopped any kind of normalized relations with Russia, unless we gut the intelligence apparatus, unless we expose to the American people this whole idea that Trump was colluding with Russia to win the election and Putin hacked the election. I mean, that's just, none of it's real. None of it's real. In fact, the idea that the DNC emails that WikiLeaks published, and this is really the origin story of quote-unquote Russiagate, was Russia and the GRU, has not only never been proven, but the evidence against it, and the evidence that it was indeed somebody on the inside of the DNC not hacking anything. Let me repeat that. Not hacking anything, but instead directly downloading these emails off of a server via a USB is overwhelming. Even within the Mueller report itself, which 99% of the public have never read, they get into WikiLeaks and an individual named Seth Rich. Now, one of my hesitations about all of these indictments and all of these arrests, etc., is the fact that this administration has still not released the Seth Rich files. And we have lawyers that have been in court trying to get these Seth Rich files since the first Trump administration, all throughout the Biden administration. And Seth Rich and WikiLeaks even get a spot within the Mueller report that a lot of people are unfamiliar with. So if everybody out there is unfamiliar with the Seth Rich story, you have this DNC staffer who was very, very pro Bernie Sanders and realized that the Democratic apparatus had stolen the primaries from Bernie Sanders. Newsflash, everybody. In 2016, Bernie Sanders, if you actually had a democratically driven constitutional republic, would have been the nominee for the Democratic Party. But the powers that should not be, the upper echelons of that party, wanted to put Hillary Clinton in there. So this individual was very upset. And
we should ask Bernie Sanders about this tonight. He's going to be at the River Center, fighting oligarchy.
I am aware of that. I wish I didn't have other plans over at the Rust Belt, because as soon as I saw that, I really felt like I should be outside of that event and talking to people. I wouldn't be surprised if you see actually some leftists out there or anti-war protesters in general out there basically protesting against what's going on with Gaza and Israel, because quite frankly, Bernie Sanders, who used to be much better at these, forever wars and military aggression, is not good on this subject. So I would assume you're going to see that. But getting back just to Seth Rich for a moment. Seth Rich ends up murdered. They tell us it is a robbery gone wrong. It doesn't seem like they took anything from him. Then they tell us that essentially there are no FBI files on Seth Rich, okay? Anybody who thinks that the FBI is involved with Seth Rich is a kook. Now, Julian Assange twice alludes to the idea that Seth Rich is the person that leaked these documents to them, the DNC emails. And how does he do so? Well, first he gets asked about sources, and he starts talking about how dangerous it is and how some staffer had just been murdered. And then he actually put out a $20,000 reward for anybody giving information leading to the arrest of the individuals that murdered Seth Rich, of which they've never arrested anybody. That stuff is actually in the Mueller report, and there's a ton of redactions surrounding it. Once again, during that time period, lo and behold, you'll never believe it, Aaron, but it turns out they lied, and that the FBI had been investigating Seth Rich and did have access to his computer. And you know what FBI agent was involved in that, Aaron?
No.
That would be Peter Strzok. So anybody that knows the story of Russiagate, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are the two FBI agents that are having an affair with one another. Strzok is cheating on his wife. And these are the emails these are the text messages between them talking about not letting Trump win and all these other things. So the guy that didn't want Trump to win was investigating him for being involved in Russia, also had deep information on Seth Rich that has still not been made publicly available to this day. So what do we have in regards to Seth Rich? Well, we have these taped phone calls of, what's his name? It's Seymour Hersh. You are aware of Seymour Hersh, yes?
No, please background.
So for those that don't know who Seymour Hersh is, I would say as far as mainstream journalists go, Hersh is the gold standard. He's got to be in his 90s at this point. He's really been around for such a long time. We're going to pull some of this stuff up. But
I know of Seymour Butts from Simpsons fame, but aside from that, no Seymour Hersh.
So Seymour Hersh, this is an individual that, for instance, when we talk about the Epstein case, right? And we talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, who is now in a country club jail, and some have reported that she may even be getting work release, although her lawyer has denied that.
What would her job be?
You know
what I mean? If you got work release, you got to have a job, right?
You would think that. But if you actually go back to the Palm Beach case with Epstein, what job was he leaving the jail for every single day? His own businesses, right? He was like normally on work release, like you said, you have some kind of job. You're helping an institution. You're here. You have a skill set, etc. We don't know that was the case for Epstein. In fact, most people didn't realize that Epstein was leaving literally almost every single day. I hope that these reports about Ghislaine Maxwell are not true. But going back to Hersh reported back in, I believe it was the late 80s, early 90s, that Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, who was a media mogul, owned the Daily Mirror and a bunch of different UK publications, very influential individual. He did a series of reports that Robert Maxwell was actually a Mossad agent working for Israel. Now, he was vehemently attacked. The mainstream came after him, and actually Robert Maxwell sued him. What ends up happening during this lawsuit is that Robert Maxwell, quote unquote, falls off his boat, the Lady Ghislaine, the boat he had named after his daughter, and dies. And yes, they ruled that one a suicide. So all of a sudden, Maxwell is dead. These allegations are out there, and lo and behold, Seymour Hersh wins in court, Aaron. So all of these publications, all of these publications that had trashed Hersh and his reporting on this had to institute a retraction and an apology, okay? So Hersh wins. Hersh ends up...
It's so common for billionaires to want to fall off their boat on purpose, because they're billionaires. And, what's the suicide rate of billionaires? Got to assume that's pretty low.
I would assume it is also pretty low. But every once in a while, there's a hedge fund manager that ends up jumping off a building or something of that nature. So certainly not zero, I guess.
Yeah. Well, in Russia, it's just, here, friend, look out the window. Nice view, huh? Oh, there you go. Now Oh, you're gone. There you go.
Or maybe you're the head of the Wagner Group, the privatized military of Russia. You make the wrong moves and your plane explodes in the air. Just saying, those things do happen.
Coincidence.
Yes.
Yeah, coincidence. Yeah.
So these tapes are out there, and they are taped by a guy named Ed Butowski. I've actually interviewed Ed several times, not about this subject because he can't talk about it legally, and we'll get to why in a moment. Butowski had hired an individual, I believe his name was Ron Wheeler, okay? And Wheeler had done a cursory investigation. He had realized that Seth Rich was involved with these emails and went on Fox News and started talking about it. And immediately, I think Sean Hannity show, immediately, conspiracy theory, not real. And even the Rich family themselves came out against Wheeler after cooperating with him. Lord knows what happened, but they just wanted to be left alone. So Butowski starts taping these calls with Hersh, and Hersh explains on the phone that the FBI had lied, which we found out later from some of the Mueller report documents, and in fact did go to access Seth Rich's computer and did think that there was something more. So essentially, the story from Hersh that anybody can listen to is that first they send the DC unit up into Rich's apartment and try to get access to his computer. They're unable to. So then they bring in the FBI unit from DC, the hotshot unit. Hersh calls them something a little bit different. They do gain access to this computer, and it seems like he is in communications with WikiLeaks, and that he even provided them with a sample of emails, and there may have even been a payment system set up through an eBay transaction, okay? Now, again, in this taped phone call that Hersh does not know is taped, he talks about this entire Russiagate thing not only being a hoax, but being a John Brennan operation. John Brennan, former head of the Central Intelligence Agency, and again, one of these people on this indictment list that we got from the Trump administration last week. Okay, so you wonder if they are actually going to go forth and arrest Brennan, which I honestly think that they should. I don't know how far that's going to go, but he does need to be arrested. Now, Hersh goes even further in this taped phone call, and he says that he has somebody on the inside of the FBI that can go in and read a file for him. So that was that Seth Rich file that is supposed to not exist. When Hersh goes to court against Butowski in this civil case, it comes out that Hersh's source is supposedly then the deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe. Now, that'll make your head spin because McCabe was a staunch anti-Trumper, somebody I believe we should not trust, and somebody who was able to raise enormous amounts of money, just like Peter Strzok, from individuals that suffered from massive TDS and just watched television news. So, you know, for me, Hersh is one of those guys that you pay attention to. He doesn't always get everything right, but if you read his take on even the Bin Laden raid, it is so much closer to the truth than what we got from the mainstream media. We have to pay attention to him. So I got to tell you, Aaron, I am hopefully optimistic that this John Bolton raid is just the beginning. Maybe we'll even see a couple more raids today. I would say this. Anybody now on that list who thinks that they had a chance of possibly not being raided and arrested, guarantee they are getting their ducks in a row. Guarantee they are lawyering up, and guarantee if there are any loose ends that they could possibly take care of in the case of physical evidence, they will try to do so. Whether or not we get successful convictions, I'm extremely doubtful. But I will say this, if we want our country back, if we want a constitutional republic of checks and balances, where even those within the executive bureaucracy can be held accountable, we must, let me repeat this, we must successfully prosecute and imprison some of these people.
And let people know, like, hey, this can happen. We're deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas, brought to you by River City's Reader, talking about some of the latest events here that have happened with Russiagate. John Bolton's home raided, and it seems like you just said, they're going to be knocking on some more doors.
It is almost surely inevitable. But now, does that mean that Hillary Clinton, who is on that list, or Barack Obama are going to jail? Probably not. Probably not. I mean,
no.
Bill Clinton is also on that list. Is he going to jail? Probably not. In fact, I would be surprised. Have you ever had an
ex-president go to jail?
That's a great question, right? You just had that Supreme Court rule that in a presidential capacity, that would be an impossibility. However, you could argue, Clinton's crimes predate his presidency. The crimes involving Trump are post his presidency. But again, you wonder whether or not the subpoenas are for Russiagate or possibly some type of new Epstein investigation. We have had, again, I discussed how today there are supposedly transactions of some of these Epstein documents. But let's not forget that we had those leaks from the New York City raid of pictures of Epstein with the Saudi royal family on his desk where these pictures are. Did you see the signed dollar bill?
No.
So, Bill Gates, who, likes to downplay, he loves to downplay that relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Aaron,
they all do.
We come from a simpler time. There was a great movie out there back in the day called Trading Places. It was actually produced by the late, great Aaron Russo, who did Freedom to Fascism on the tax system and the IRS. He was one of my favorite guests and one of my favorite people to talk to. God, he's got to be gone now, close to 15 years. Just around there, he's been gone. But for those that don't know what movie we're talking about, it was this parody of the Wall Street system where you had these two brothers that were a representation of the Rockefeller brothers, by the way. And
I didn't know that. There's Mortimer, and what was the other one's name?
Oh, I know the Mortimer.
Mortimer.
Yes.
Because remember, in Coming to America, he finds them and gives them the money.
Yes, they get a cameo at the very end of Coming to America, which is also a great movie.
It's Randolph, yes. And Mortimer. Those are the two old guys.
Anyway,
so sorry.
They make a decision that one of them thinks essentially it's the nature versus nurture argument. They're going to find a black man, and one of them thinks that they can do the job of basically their CEO, which is Dan Aykroyd. This very waspy white guy, and so they bet each other $1. It's a $1 bet, and they essentially ruin Dan Aykroyd's life, and they try to bring Eddie Murphy up. The reason I bring up that $1 bet is because this is a framed $1 bill signed by Bill Gates that says, "You were right, Jeffrey." And signed Bill Gates.
We don't know what the bet is.
We don't know what the bet is. But when you're dealing with billionaires and power, it's more to say that you beat that person or they admitted they were wrong, that you put it in a frame rather than, I'm going to get your boat or I'm going to get this property. No, it's just enough to have that dollar bill. So there is a multitude of things that could come out via Epstein. Again, they never investigated the Zorro Ranch facility that is in the middle of the desert.
And we've seen a ton of stuff with him and the Clintons that just doesn't get made mainstream. I mean, they're really on the Trump train right now trying to, pin him with Epstein. But there's, Bill Clinton wrote him a letter that was in that book, too. There's just nobody really talking about that. Just like we don't talk about, Hillary Clinton's RBF being like on the Mount Rushmore of RBFs. I mean, she's right up there. But anyway, that's just the media play, right? I mean, they want you to listen to this, or at least one side does, and the other side, and I don't know. My head spins around sometimes with all this stuff.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you brought up that birthday letter, right? Because I think that is something that people should see. So if you do want to watch this after the fact, if you're listening and you've only heard of this birthday letter, maybe take a look at it. Because, Aaron, what I don't do when a news story comes out is I don't break out my jump to conclusions, Matt. And I don't say, this is fake, it's 100% fake, or, oh, I know it's real. I do a thing called waiting to see the evidence. So this thing has actually been published now. And the way it was described initially, I was like, well, let's hold on before you come out and say that it's totally fake. I mean, I know that Trump threatened the $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal. I don't know that it was ever filed, okay? A lot of that is a part of the information war. So what we're going to do right now, for those that are watching or maybe want to watch later, we're going to show you what this thing looks like. All right, so it's on a Trump letterhead for those watching at home. Right there, and the fact that it is a part of a book where Bill Clinton also wished him a happy birthday, people like Woody Allen, who are in the contacts and constantly going to the New York home, they also did it. This makes me think that it's real. And then, on top of that, if you take a look at it, and it's a little bit, let's zoom it up. There we go. At the very, basically what you have is this typed up letter that obviously Trump probably didn't write or type up, but probably had somebody else do it for him. And then a sketch of a naked woman and her breasts. And in that sketch, it says, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. And may every day be another wonderful secret. And then let's just say where her genitals are. Instead of drawing genitals, Donald simply signed his name. So,
yeah,
I'm just saying that actually does seem par for the course for the type of humor that Donald Trump has. I think that this thing is probably valid. I think there are more embarrassing things to come via Trump and Epstein. Not necessarily anything illegal, but once again, it was pretty quick for the media to start publishing pictures of Epstein at his second wedding to Marla Maples. Now, I want people to think about that. Obviously, there were a ton of people at Donald Trump's second wedding. Now, is it the age of the cell phone and everybody having pictures? No. But would individuals have those pictures? Yes. And yet, we didn't see any of those pictures until 2025. And obviously, this has been a huge story now for some time, to some of us well over a decade. He also, Trump, has come out and said that relationship continued until Epstein stole workers from him, not once but twice, from his spa, which included Virginia Giuffre Roberts. So this means that, yeah, they had a relationship through the early 2000s. We certainly haven't seen every picture of video of them together. And Michael Wolff, who I must admit I am no fan of, but he interviewed both Trump and Epstein. He has audio tapes of Epstein, of which he's published this small sample of Epstein talking about Trump being his best friend, but the audio is so distorted, it's really hard to put it into context. Wolff claims that one of the pictures that Jeffrey Epstein showed him was Donald Trump at his estate surrounded by topless women, like a group of topless women. Now, there may be absolutely nothing illegal there. All of those women may have been 18 and above. Still doesn't make Donald Trump look great if that picture surfaces and it's at the Epstein estate, right, Aaron? So you're probably yeah, you're probably not going to want to put that in the public arena. And Michael Wolff tends to believe that picture was probably in Epstein's safe, as there were a multitude of pictures and videos that were also taken from that safe and put into FBI custody. But that would be far, far, far from the only stuff that is in FBI custody. In fact, that's really one of the big things about this case is there is just so many files on Epstein. And I'm going to show the audience some of this if you are watching via the TV. So right here behind me are a multitude of binders, a little over a dozen binders, where they have blue Post-it notes on them, but wherever there is either a picture or a description of what is in the binders, they've blacked it out. Now, these same blackout marks were over those pictures of Epstein in Saudi Arabia with the latest, with MBS. So again, that Saudi Arabian relationship goes through several decades. The Bill Gates dollar bill that we talked about, that was also blacked out. So we don't really know what is in these folders, but what we do know in these discs right here behind me, these burn discs, now those folders may just have a multitude of burned discs, and we can tell by what's written on these discs that these are burned DVDs. They are not burned CDs. And the one behind me is labeled 812 and says AV shoot number 2, and it seems to have the name Selena on it. Okay? So it would seem this is a disc of some kind of audio-video shoot with Selena. Now, right next to that is yet another disc with AV on it, but this time it says AV photos. So you would assume on that disc, all you have are photographs. The amount of discs, folders, pictures, and videos is enormous. In fact, right now what you're looking at are a bunch of hard drives. And these hard drives, which is very telling, have police evidence tape on them. Okay, I want people to think about that. That means at some point, the police had already had these hard drives, gave them back to Epstein, and Epstein still kept them for some reason. Now, during the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, we got an article behind me, rarely apart, file on Epstein hard drive details relationship with Maxwell. So here in this article from December of 2021, they are discussing how these hard drives detail this relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell, which was extensive, according to eyewitness testimony and obviously the trial. She was taking part in the abuse of these young girls as well. That should absolutely be noted. And many people believe that she was in the driver's seat, or at least a co-partner in all of this. Now, on top of all of those documents, okay, Aaron, behind me is a man named Brad Edwards, okay? And Brad Edwards was a lawyer for a multitude of the Jeffrey Epstein victims, including Virginia Giuffre Roberts, who is amongst the most famous. Now, Bradley Edwards is also the individual who, when he was interviewed by Derek Brose and asked about the relationship with Trump, he said that he had obtained the Black Book and he had gone through all of the contacts in the Black Book, and nobody would talk to him. Nobody came back and contacted him other than Donald Trump. Okay, so we got to put that into perspective. Bradley Edwards said that Trump was cooperative and helped out. Well, Bradley Edwards won in court against Jeffrey Epstein. Essentially, he got an undisclosed amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein and an apology. I read that apology on air yesterday. Anybody can go read that apology. And basically, it was this carefully crafted and worded letter to essentially exonerate Bradley Edwards of any wrongdoing, and instead say that he was representing his clients to the best of his ability. Epstein brought this to the very brink. Essentially, he settled with Edwards after they had chosen a jury. Now, if people are looking at this, they will see what appears to be boxes stacked 4 to 5 high, okay, filled with documentation, again, over a dozen across the way. We're talking about 60 to 100 boxes of documents on Epstein in one case alone. If we were to get the Epstein files, everything I just showed you and more would be part of those files. So I've got to tell you, I'm not holding my breath. We talked about the Clintons earlier. If there is, a high-level political family that what really was involved with Epstein, it would be them. I mean, a lot of people don't like. I mean, there are others, but Epstein was in the White House 17 times between 93 and 95. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton both went to Zorro Ranch on numerous occasions. And another thing that they don't tell you about Epstein is, aside from managing money and being involved in banks and being involved with Les Wexner, etc., he was also heavily involved in modern-day globalism through think tanks and institutions such as the Council on Foreign Relations, which he was a member, and the even more astute, I would say, Trilateral Commission, which has a much smaller membership, but again, drives the world into this type of global governance scenario and global narrative scenario. So look, I'm hopeful that, I mean, the John Bolton thing has got me amped. I'm not going to lie, Aaron. I love it.
You seem a little amped today. I'm just going to say.
I was not expecting to wake up to that. I've had a lot of people come at me for daring to, post my positive thoughts on this administration when something like this happens, when Gabbard fires half of the DNI, et cetera, and they'll be like, oh, they're a shill and they're a warmonger and they did this and what about this and what about this? I get it. But if we want to be intellectually honest, we have to take the good with the bad. We have to praise the administration and others for doing the right thing when they do the right thing. And then when they do the wrong thing, like put out a piece of paper saying case closed on Epstein, he killed himself and had no co-conspirators, you got to go buck wild. Yeah, you got to take it to the streets. And that's just the way it works in any political system. I would say this administration really is different in the sense that you can put political pressure on it. You could never, ever, ever expect to put political pressure on, say, a Biden administration or, God forbid, a Kamala Harris administration, because they don't run anything, okay? They don't have a clear thought in their head. So as many people who were upset about the January 6th prosecutions and this show trial that they had literally a TV producer put together, they didn't care. They were putting people in jail. They were trying to put more people in jail. This administration at least did the right thing and pardoned the vast majority of those people out of the gates. Right now, there is the Tina Peters case that I really hope that this administration steps in and does the right thing. Tina Peters was one of the individuals during the 2020 election that was on the election board, dared to speak out on the overt corruption that was occurring during that 2020 election, and now we are getting a bunch more of the internal documents on what really happened there as well. And she's currently serving prison time. She's in prison. This is like a 65, 70-year-old woman who dared to do her job and be honest, and she was prosecuted and successfully convicted for it. That should let everybody know that our justice system, unfortunately, in many cases, is actually an injustice system, Aaron.
Well, it's politicized. Like everything else, we're so polarized, it's just so crazy. But, you're talking about a guy like Epstein. Seems like he was one of the bosses. Like he was one of the people that told the politicians what to do, and it wasn't just people on one side of the aisle. It was both. And it makes me wonder, too, is there an Epstein trail in some of this Russiagate stuff? Because, I mean, if anybody's got the international connections, knows everybody, entertains them, this, that, and the other, seems like this guy might have, who knows how deep this thing goes.
Well, as far as being one of the quote-unquote bosses over politicians, I think that comes along with currying favor through sexual favors of his harem, whether that is underage or overage girls. There's been a lot of highlights, and I understand why, around the pedophilia of Jeffrey Epstein. And really, this guy was a serial pedophile that did prefer teenage girls or girls that looked in their teenage years. But that doesn't mean that all of the girls that were with the powerful or at these parties were underage at the time. In fact, if you look at the other people that are probably part of that non-prosecution agreement, Nadia Marcinkova, Adriana Ross, Sarah Kalin, and Leslie Groff, in large part, it looks like they were overage during that. So now you have Epstein basically currying favor, or let's say you don't want to cut a deal. Let's say you're not Prince Andrew, and you're not, because I don't know if you've heard these reports, but they seem pretty solid and in line with the research I've done over the years. There's a new book out there about Prince Andrew, and it kind of highlights the relationship between Ghislaine Maxwell and Prince Andrew, and how Ghislaine Maxwell really infiltrated that long before Jeffrey Epstein, that she had a sexual relationship with Andrew, and that essentially, they would hook up from time to time. It was nothing very, very serious. And she's the one that brought him to Epstein. And this got them more involved with the royal family. And of course, we've talked about it here before. Epstein was an arms dealer, and Prince Andrew was an arms dealer. To me, that's the big connection, is that you want to curry favor with these people so you can cut multi-million, if not multi-billion-dollar arms deals with them. The same could be said with Saudi Arabia. Like I said, not only do we have these pictures now of Epstein with a multitude of Saudis, including MBS, but we have to remember in the first Trump administration, although Trump talked tough on Saudi Arabia and went out there and said, maybe we're going to find out who did 9/11 and all these other things alluding to Saudi Arabia. As soon as he was in there, he cut a $400+ billion arms deal with him. Okay? I think it's billion. I think it's billion with a B and not 400 million. Maybe Jason Bermas gets that one wrong. It's been a while. I don't love cutting arms deals with Saudi Arabia. On top of that, within that safe that we discussed in that raid, and nobody in mainstream journalism has touched this story, they found a passport that had been used many times, that had dates in it and locations, with Jeffrey Epstein via a fake name and address in Saudi Arabia. And they found cash.
Another identity.
Yes. And I mean, the guy had multiple identities, numerous homes that were completely isolated. It wasn't one island, it was two islands. It was New Mexico. It was New York. He had a place over in Paris. All right? And everybody acts like we don't know, where did this come from? We know where a lot of it came from, because there is a money trail. There is a timeline. And I think it has just been the willful ignorance of the mainstream media, along with the absurdness, if you will, of the quote-unquote alternative or alt-right media that just wants a talking point, that just wants to say the word pedophile, that just wants to sit there and act like they have the moral high ground. Hey, how about forgetting that and sticking to the facts and delivering on those and what's actually going on? And the fact is that this guy seems to have had a multitude of different use cases that involved the very wealthy, the very political, those in power in Hollywood and entertainment, and then at the end of the day, also globally in the arms trade.
One of the bosses. That's what I think.
I mean, again, as far as I think the guy was taking orders from numerous people. I think that Leslie Wexner certainly should have been investigated. But I think that he was a very, very large player on the global scale. And what really concerns me is not only that it doesn't seem like we're going to get the accountability necessary with somebody like this, but how many other quote-unquote Epsteins are out there globally that we've never heard of?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, that's, I agree 100%. But he's not the only one. He just happened to, I don't know, let a little too much out there, knew too many high-profile people, and, now after the fact, we're going to start to see more and more about this. And we're going to see more and more about Russiagate here now that there's some raids happening. We got plenty to talk about, Jason Bermas, that's for sure. We've been deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas for the last hour. We do this every Friday at 9 a.m. now, brought to you by River City's Reader. And, I love talking to you just because I don't know what's going to happen next, essentially. Because you always have, other information, and then, go check this out and go check this out. It's great stuff. Highly recommend everybody check out Jason's films. I just rewatched Loose Change for the first time in years, and it still blows your mind. You see all the evidence. You talk the guy from BYU with the explosive stuff. There's just certain things that really, anyway, we'll get more into that next week. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about these rabbit octopus chimeras that are popping up in Colorado. I just think it's ironic. You talked about this 2 weeks ago, and then there's a news story about it right after. Because I know, Jason Bermas, people will hear some of the things you say, and they're like, this guy's crazy, whatever, this, that, and the other. But for you to, talk about it, and then literally, 4 days later, there's pictures and stories about this happening, I don't see how rabbits possibly mate with an octopus naturally. I don't see that happening.
Well,
it would be impossible, I believe.
I would say this, there's a lot going on with our wildlife right now, and I think a lot of it does have to do with human intervention. On top of the octopus rabbit story, we've got this story about squirrels that are supposedly oozing something. There's another story out there of wild pigs that when you open them up, instead of being red on the inside, they're bright blue. And if you really want to get into kind of government experimentation, chimeras, which we did discuss a couple weeks back, I would tell people to check into Plum Island and the origin of the tick-based Lyme disease, because you've had a lot of officials come forward and even people within government essentially say that Lyme disease is one of these government-created diseases that they'll probably try to sell you were leaked out of a lab. But I tend to think when these things break out, they are intentionally seeded amongst the populace.
Right. Well, they'll sell you a vaccine for it, right?
Well, I don't know if we're ever getting a vaccine for Lyme's. But again, I would tell people that if you see the hype around things like HIV or AIDS, it's all about your immune system, right? And we're all familiar with that. But Lyme's disease is really the one that will attack your immune system and utterly destroy it.
Yeah, I know some folks that have been battling that for a long time. My wife says the thing we got to watch out for is fungus, but we got lots of rabbit holes to discover and jump down here for sure. More things to talk about. We'll be back next Friday with Jason Bermas, Deep in the Weeds, brought to you by River City's Reader. And again, he gave you all the information on being able to check this out on video. If you want to see some of the graphics that he had to show during the show, please check that out. Please check out his documentaries. And Jason, I'll sure look forward to next week, buddy.
All right. Thank you so much, Aaron. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for the Deep in the Weeds segment that we do every single Friday. Please, once again, guys, as you can see, this is not a partisan broadcast. It is reality-based. I need your support. Please consider supporting the broadcast. Big donors need you now more than ever. Want to continue doing my thing, bringing the truth no matter what. Why? Because it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and we will see you on the flip side.